if you look at a project like OpenSauce, we have to date we've got 56 contributors, including two different versions of Dependabot, which is amazing.
It's Issues with Brian.
Oh, hey, fancy seeing you there. All right, so we are going to do really quickly at Issues with Brian. Thanks everyone who's sitting here and chatting with us because we do this live every Wednesday and Friday. Wednesdays is the new day. All right, so we have a PR that's open, and what we actually this PR came from another conversation on another PR. So if you're using npm 6 or earlier, there's issues with the way you contribute. So essentially, we're using shrink wrap, npm shrink wrap. It's pretty common in use for like plugins in libraries. So we're using that in OpenSauce. It helps sort of keep things in sync. And we have this little note. So if using node 14 or sorry, before, or node 6 or before, you're going to get a little message in your terminal basically telling you, hey, you should use 14 or later or 7 or later. And it was something that didn't come up until very recently. And recently, we've actually had a number of releases. So here in 0.26.1, inside the README, there was a link to the contributing guide that got fixed. So shout out to who was that? There was somebody who came through. Um, I'm gonna not pronounce your name correctly, but thank you very much for your help. And then we had this other change, which is enhance the contributions for rendering. So this is the PR here. And also, if you didn't know, you could hover over these little things to see like the background of folks and everything like that. So again, another name, Rudvik. Thank you very much for the contribution. Hopefully, I contributed your name out loud properly. But yeah, so we had like this little list on the right, which basically was kind of bland. It was all sort of this little circles with dots, which yeah, not very descriptive. So now, whenever you go to an issue, you'll see different types of interactions from GitHub. So if your pull request is merged, or if you have an issue, or if you have a closed issue, or sorry, if you have a closed branch or a PR, that those will all be highlighted based on that. And it was actually pretty nice to get this contribution because it's something that's like a nice enhancement, but I didn't really have like I didn't have this sort of forethought to add that, which is why we take contributions. So now we've got this nice little commit type function which inputs the status, and if it's a draft, it's mergeable, if it's a PR, and then basically returns a SVG based on whatever the input was. So that's where that contribution is. But also from this contribution, this was actually the PR that we had the conversation about the npm 6. So this individual had an older version of npm. They also committed an update to the npm to the shrink wrap JSON, which also kind of got stuff out of sync and out of lock. The whole conversation's here. Feel free to read it. But it brings us to this. So Vortex has added a contribution to use the thing that I don't really have a lot of experience with, which is the npm check engine. It gives you a way to sort of give you a nice little error message or a failure when trying to run npm install. So it was built in between versions 1 to 3 and then in 7. Okay, interesting. Yeah. So it's just out of my purview. I don't even know what the earliest version of npm I use, but this is it. If you're all interested in learning about this and learning how this works, check it out. But also, if you have any context on using check engines, you want to make sure that we're all using the same versions and we're having consistency across all contributions. Because if you look at a project like OpenSauce, we have to date we've got 56 contributors, including two different versions of Dependabot, which is amazing. So shout out to that. Thanks for the follow. Appreciate that. So that is that. This is the conversation. What I love about this in Vortex, I appreciate your contribution to as well, because you're able to constrain these updates into singular npm packages. So that way, if anybody wants to also check their engine as well on their projects, they can also leverage this too. So if you're watching, give this project a star because call to actions for the win.
It's Issues with Brian.
Also, shout out to our automated release notes and our automated releases. If you want to check that out, just head over to OpenSauce inside the workflows. So these are GitHub actions, and check out release. And then you'll see all the secret sauce of how to do how we're doing releases